You've all heard these legendary songs.
I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. I got the rap patrol on the cat patrol. Wake up. Run, rush, and put a little makeup. I just have to fade away the shake up. Why'd you leave the keys up on the...
But do you know who produced them? Rick Rubin, who happens to know absolutely nothing about music.
Do you play instruments?
Barely.
Do you know how to work a soundboard?
No. I have no technical ability, and I know nothing about music.
Moreover, he worked with bands and artists like Eminem, Linkin Park, Jay-Z, Run DMC, Metallica, and many others. So, what exactly did he do to get the credit? Surely he didn't just sleep peacefully on the couch and do nothing while his artists were creating music, right?
So what are you being paid for?
But you know what? Let's let Rubin himself answer this question at the very end of the video. Even though, honestly speaking, you're already going to understand it all without his words if you'll listen carefully to what we're talking about here. And we're talking about how Rick Rubin changed music without even getting off the couch. Music appeared in Rick Rubin's life very early on. At the age of 3, he heard rock and roll music by the Beatles. At that moment, it was his first time feeling something strange. It was something different. From that point onwards, he was in love with music. His parents didn't forbid music, but they didn't exactly support it either. Everything came from himself. Little Rick Rubin controlled the radio in the car when the whole family went out. He only listened to what he liked. His dad loved Latino jazz, and Rick recognizes that this also most likely influenced his ear for music. In his youth, he had a punk group that goes by the name Hose. They recorded one single and one mini-album, totaling 500 copies sold each. In 1981, he moved to New York and enrolled in NYU. Initially, he majored in philosophy. Later, he switched his major to film and TV, and he simultaneously plunged into the city's music life. He went out every night. He could go see David Bowie at Madison Square Garden and then to see Bad Brains at CBGB's. New York in the 80s was something else. Raw, alive, and crazy. Clubs didn't close all night. There was a mix of genres and a mix of people. At one floor, there would be hip-hop, while at another, a disco, and in the floors above that, something else as well. The scene was buzzing, and Rick was specifically hooked on hip-hop. But there was an issue. Music in the clubs was raw, lively, and energetic. And those rare hip-hop records that came out on vinyl sounded like R&B. Because the producers that made them didn't understand hip-hop. They acted on habit, as they did with soul groups. This bugged Rick. He wanted to create a record that would sound exactly like it sounded on stage. He got to know Kool Moe Dee from the band Treacherous 3, his favorite. He wanted to sign them, but it turned out they were already signed by Sugar Hill Records. He was then offered others, like T-La Rock, the brother of a group member. This is where the idea for the first track was born, called It's Yours. Rick didn't know how to program drum machines. He didn't have a manual. But in his dorm room, there was a Roland 808, borrowed from a guitarist from a neighboring band. There was a DJ setup and a PA system. He just started experimenting. What's more is that he invited his favorite DJ, Jazzy J, whom he met at clubs like Negril and Roxy. Everything was recorded in a cheap power play studio for $40 an hour. 3 hours in, and the track was ready. Rick Rubin didn't just want to release music, he wanted to make music according to his own rules. He came up with the name Def Jam Recordings, drew up a logo, and decided that the first release, the It's Yours single, has to be published under this logo, even if it was being released by Party Time Records. Yeah, you heard that right, a label in a dorm room. Can you imagine just an average dorm room at a university in New York, and you've got yourself a label on paper and a guy who doesn't yet know that he will change music forever? And here is when something interesting happened. They started getting demo tapes to his dorm room. Amongst them, there was one cassette tape from an unknown teen from Queens. It had "Ladies Love Cool James" written on it. LL showed up at the dorm room. He was only 16 years old. "Are you Rick?" he asked from the doorway. "I thought you were black." At that time, there were basically no white people in the rap industry. The scene was small and underground, but Rick had a passion, and he knew that this would be the music that would change everything. LL rapped out his lyrics right there in the room, and they soon recorded the first demo. The first track they made together was "I Need a Beat." The record was released in late 1984, and it unexpectedly sold more than 120,000 copies. The recording was recorded in a dirty studio that Rick jokingly called the Chung King House of Metal. In reality, it was just a shabby basement called the Secret Sound in Chinatown. The owner was John King, which is where the name Chung King came from. But there was actual magic inside it. There worked an engineer called Jay Burnett, author of the underground track Drum Machine, which Rick adored. The recording was not possible to find, so he offered to reissue it under Def Jam. Later, Jay Burnett, impressed by Rick's interest in this rare single, offered to reissue it under Def Jam. But this time, it was a new version. He invited Adam Nathaniel Yauch, better known as MCA from the Beastie Boys band, to rap over the Drum Machine. This is how we got the remix to Drum Machine, a rare and strange track which became Def Jam's fourth single.
On the mix. Most of the time he works all the machines, but he doesn't really rhyme, side fake.
Jay later told Rick about another studio in Chinatown, this time with professional equipment. And even though Rick himself didn't yet understand what Neve 8028 meant, he followed the advice. Many probably also don't understand what this strange word means, but Neve 8028 is an analog mixing console made by the legendary British company Neve. It was considered to be one of the best sounding consoles in the history of sound recording. This is the console that was used to record the Nirvana album and Red Hot Chili Peppers. It later turned out that this studio, Secret Sound, was a cover for drug trafficking. Rick himself said that he did not know that at the time. So, do we believe him? In any case, this is how the first release from the official Def Jam label with the burgundy sticker was born. Rick, still living in the dorm room, started distributing records throughout the whole country. He called unknown distributors, sent them like 50 to 100 copies, and kept with the demand. Sure enough, the space near the dorm's post office was filled with boxes of records. But Def Jam's true story started a little later, with Russell Simmons' arrival. Russell was the brother and manager of the members of Run DMC, and by that moment, he was already an influential figure in street hip-hop. When he met up with Rick, an artistic union instantly sparked between them. One is a fan of the punk aesthetic and minimalism, while the other is deep into the street culture, into rap. Rick Rubin soon started working with Run DMC on an album that later became the legendary Raising Hell. Rick Rubin was a fan of theirs. For him, they were the equivalent of the Beatles, but in the rap world. What's most interesting is that Run DMC themselves showed up at Rubin's dorm room to work with him. Up until that, Rick had already met up with Run DMC and even played the guitar in one of the tracks. It was just bare chords, but still. It was in this album that the idea to collaborate with Aerosmith came to mind. At that time, Aerosmith's career was on the decline. The group had broken up, but they were legendary. So Rick Rubin pulled one of the boldest and most influential experiments in the decade. He joined rock with rap. Run DMC agreed to use the music of Walk This Way, but refused to sing the words. They didn't want to make a cover. Russell Simmons then simply said, "Do what Rick said." Rick thought, how can I explain that rap is music? You need to take a song that already sounds like rap, but is not considered rap. And Walk This Way perfectly fit the description. This song's beat was already sounded in rap clubs, just like other sacred breaks of that time, like Apache, Big Beat Billy Squire, the songs that nobody fully actively listened to, but those drum parties were staples for breakdance. When Rick recorded the instrumental, the Profile Records label contacted Aerosmith, and there we had it, Steven Tyler and Joe Perry came to the studio. Rubin was shocked as he grew up to their music, seeing them in stadiums in front of 70,000 people. And despite what he had seen of how they fell off, for him, they were still Aerosmith. Rick turned on the track, Joe recorded the guitar, Steven was the vocalist. That is how one of the greatest crossovers in the history of hip-hop was born, and it was released in 1986. Initially, the reaction was harsh. In Boston, at the WBCN radio station, people demanded that the track be taken off the air. But after only 1 week, it became the most demanded. The popularity echoed to other stations, particularly rock and alternative ones. Rap made its way into the mainstream, but it didn't do it alone. With the guitar riff and aggressive delivery style, it was reaching places where it was never expected before. This all happened in parallel to when Rick started working with the Beastie Boys. Their earlier song, Cookie Puss, was half-jokingly composed with funk beat and a prank call to an ice cream place. And this hooked Rick.
A cookie puss? Hey! A cookie puss? Maybe I should scratch.
He first heard it at a radio station in San Francisco, while still being a member of his punk group. They were a guitar rock group, but they gravitated towards hip-hop and wanted to perform Cookie Puss in their live sessions. This is how Rick became a DJ, and he even got himself the bubble machine from the dorm. It was right then and there that the Beastie Boys' legendary transformation began. In 1985, the EP Rock Hard was released. This release, of course, did not become a hit, but it became vital for the band. From punk to hip-hop, and from experimentation to revolution. It was also important to Rubin himself. These successes helped the young label get a serious distribution deal from Columbia Records. Def Jam sealed the 7-figure deal, and Rick happily sent his parents a picture of his first check for $600,000. They then made a hit song, No Sleep Till Brooklyn. The music was rude, almost primitive, but this is where it held its strength. Mixing rock and rap was born not as a marketing ploy, but as a reflection of the real music taste of a generation that grew up on both cultures at the same time. There was nothing artificial in this. On the contrary, everything sounded alive and natural. Working with groups like Slayer and later Metallica, Rick noticed a pattern. The faster the music, the easier it turns into a blurry mess if using the standard big rock sounds. He then put forward a simple yet revolutionary theory. We need to remove everything that's excess, make each sound short and sharp. With these approaches, he went to Slayer's studio. Having no prior experience in metal, he didn't follow any patterns. He didn't try to make metal better or purer. He started from square one and found a core. This is how Rain in Blood came to be. The gold standard of thrash metal was recorded in a total of 4 weeks in one of the band members' mother's garage.
To the kingdom of the dead, sadistic, surgeon of demise, sadist of the noblest blood.
At the peak of success, Rubin just suddenly quit Def Jam. In 1998, he had a conflict with the label's new president, Liar Cohen. Instead of imposing his ways, he just left Def Jam in Simmons' hands, simply moved to Los Angeles in search of a new sound and freedom, and to continue producing albums like the Red Hot Chili Peppers album Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. Flea, the group's bassist, noted that prior to meeting Rubin, we weren't able to convey our freedom in the studio, and you could feel some sort of stiffness in our records. With Rick, it all became easy. He created an environment where we just played.
I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day.
However, he founded his own label once again. Rick created his own private label, Def American Recordings. Yeah, you heard it right, again with the Def, but this time in a different side of the States. He was quick to sign the gloomy Danzig, the Colts Hard Rockers, and experimented with alternative like the Jesus and Mary Chain. It seemed that Rubin had now fully gone in a guitar dive, but he didn't leave hip-hop, as at the same time, Def American released records of the young hip-hop group The Ghetto Boys. He also continued to work with the old friends Public Enemy and LL Cool J. It was just that now he had more varied music around him. A real event took place in Rubin's life during this period of time that deserves its own scene. In 1993, he suddenly decided to hold a funeral for the word deaf. The matter is that by that time, the word deaf, meaning cool in slang, had ended up in the dictionary and became overused. For the rebellious Rick, this meant a symbolic end of an era. He officially renamed his label, removing deaf from the name and keeping it only as American Recordings. And he went the extra mile while doing so. He organized a mock funeral ceremony with a coffin, a gravestone, invited guests, and even a farewell speech from civil rights activist Al Sharpton. This was an iconic performance, a farewell to street slang that became mainstream. When the word deaf from the street slang made its way into mass culture, it lost its meaning, Rubin later explained. In 1993, right after Def's funeral, Rick took on a completely unexpected project at the American Recordings label, a job with the legendary country singer Johnny Cash. Back then, Johnny Cash was on the brink of being forgotten, laid off from labels and forgotten by the industry, and it was Rick Rubin himself who extended to him a helping hand. He didn't force Cash to change. He just turned on the mic in his own living room and said, "Play whatever you want." This is how the first album came to be in '94 at American Recordings and began one of the most touching musical stories, A Second Breath.
The Tennessee stud was long and lean, the color of the sun, and his eyes were green.
The album was released completely bare bone, but it was exactly this simplicity that sent shivers down people's spines. Critics rejoiced. The record received a Grammy, and what's most important is that Johnny Cash was back to the Music Olympics. Then there were more albums. Cash performed songs of Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen, and even Soundgarden, but he sounded like himself in each track. Authentic.
I'm gonna break my rusty cage.
10 years after they began working together, Rick Rubin offered Johnny Cash a song, which he didn't take seriously at first, Hurt by the band 9 Inch Nails. "Have you even heard how I sing?" said Cash at the time, listening to Trent Reznor's difficult industrial version. But Rick didn't give up. He recorded an acoustic demo and said, "Just read the lyrics." And Cash read them, and it was as if they were about him specifically. An aging voice, shaky breathing, the years of pain, losses, and regrets. This was not just a cover, this was a testament. The music video for Hurt, which was released in 2003, went viral before the word viral was a thing. Even Trent Reznor admitted that, "This is no longer my song."
Everyone I know goes away.
For millions of people, Hurt was the final chapter of a great life. For Cash, it was the final confession. And for Rick Rubin, it was symbolic to the fact that music can resurrect the soul.
Profound sense of regret.
What have I become?
Yeah, and to hear when you're 20 years old talking about regret, it's heartbreaking, but it's heartbreaking in a different way because you have your whole life to figure it out. When you're looking back over your life at the end of your life with regret, it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal. So that was the initial spark of doing it.
While Rick Rubin was helping Cash resurrect his career, he didn't forget about his other protégés. In 1995, Red Hot Chili Peppers released the album One Hot Minute, where Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction played the guitar. The album was successful with more than 2 million copies sold in the US alone. But there's a sense of unease in it, experimentation and soul-searching. However, the actual boom happened in 1999 when the band brought back John Frusciante and with him, their signature sound. Rick Rubin produced Californication. The album became one of the most commercially successful in the band's history, selling more than 15 million copies worldwide. The hit songs sounded everywhere, from MTV to school dances.
Centuries are what it meant to me. A cemetery where I married.
It wasn't just an album, it was Red Hot Chili Peppers' rebirth.
Scar tissue that I wish you saw. Sarcastic Mr. Know-It-All.
And in the epicenter of this renaissance, you find him again, Rick Rubin, the one who never hindered the group, didn't push, and didn't pressure. He just helped them listen to their own selves. He also relaunched the sound of the group Linkin Park. After 2 powerful albums, Linkin Park became the kings of nu metal. The guys had grown up and wanted to escape from the boundaries of the screaming MTV sounds. And exactly here, he relaunched the sound of the group. Yep, in this album, Minutes to Midnight in 2007, we hear more lively vocals, ballads, and melancholies. Rubin, just like before, took down all the excesses and gave the group what they were most afraid of: honesty. Mike Shinoda recalled that Rick Rubin literally flipped their approach to making music upside down. He said phrases like, "And what about if we absolutely do nothing?" And that was quite confusing. They initially understood that silence is also a part of music, that you don't necessarily have to complicate the track to be loud. Such a minimalistic approach was eye-opening for the group. However, Rubin did not remove the anger that is typical of this band. He gave it a place. He arranged the emotions into compartments, so we can hear such angry tracks, such as Given Up and No More Sorrow.
I've given
In the year 2000, Rick Rubin became such an influential figure that major label Columbia Records offered him a position as the co-chairman of the company. Imagine this: a person who started while laying on the floor of a studio in ripped jeans is now one of the decision makers influencing the politics of a major label. But to be fair, Rubin remained true to himself in this position. He barely went into the office, preferring to work directly with music. Under his leadership, Columbia released successful records by Neil Diamond, Dixie Chicks, and others. In 2007, TV channel MTV named Rick Rubin as the most influential producer of the past 20 years. Just a second there. They said it in 2007, but they meant to cover the period from 1987 to 2007, as, in many ways, it was thanks to Rubin that this period was so electric. In that same year, Time magazine included him in the list of 100 most influential people in the world. Generally speaking, during his lifetime, Rick had become a legend. However, you yourselves understand that perfect things only exist in movies. Sure, he changed music, produced the best albums for everyone, created rap rock, and relaunched the careers of many. But in reality, he had his fair share of bad luck and scandals. For example, it is Rick himself who is credited for playing one of the main roles in the so-called loudness wars, which, according to some, are the reasons why modern music sounds bad. The thing of the matter is that in the 80s and 90s, songs didn't have a general standard of loudness as they do now. But then it was known that the brain perceives loud music as of considerably higher quality and more rhythmic. In other words, if you would listen to 2 similar songs on the radio, you would most likely choose the louder one. That's just how the brain works. And this is why certain producers started doing louder music than others. And then the others went louder than the first. The third went louder than the second, and it just kept going. The same song in the original disc sounded one way, then it evolved in the 90s and sounded another way, and then that same song was reissued in the 2000s sounding completely differently. And, well, seemed like it didn't matter. Just create a bass-boosted version and it'll be awesome. But there are problems. The louder we make music, the nearer it gets to hitting the ceiling of the loudness limit. And these ladder steps that make rich and saturated sounds in such songs turn into excessively compressed audio. And so, in 2008, Rick Rubin became the producer of Metallica's long-awaited album, Death Magnetic. This album should have returned them to the fame they had in the 80s. And it seemed like everything was working out. Their style was once again fierce, tough, and loud. But now, volume became an issue. The album was criticized for its excessive compressions. Many complain that everything sounds too loud and unclean, as if the dynamics were sacrificed in favor of loudness. The album's sounds didn't even look like this, and not like this either. It looked like this. Death Magnetic was so loud and overcompressed that it was just not possible to listen to its songs that weren't actually that bad in reality. There were no soft drums there, no loud sounds, no accented segments. Everything was just loud. Metallica fans didn't like that, to the extent they started making petitions for the album to be remastered and released as a newer one. But despite Rubin and the group denying it all, Death Magnetic made history as the peak of the loudness wars. Nevertheless, the album became a super hit, and it once again placed Metallica in the center of attention. Now, such a style is actively used in hip-hop, like by Playboi Carti. Just listen to how his tracks now sound like. And yes, by the way, we totally forgot about something in this video about hip-hop. Rick Rubin produced 99 Problems for Jay-Z, which became a hit song.
I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. I got the rap patrol on the cat patrol.
And he also worked with Eminem.
Now the shit's about to kick off, this party looks whack. Let's take it back to straight hip-hop and start it from scratch.
And he was producer for Marshall's album Revival, which turned out to be far from being Eminem's best album, frankly speaking.
Knowing that no matter what bars I come with, you're gonna harp gripe, and that's a hard Vicodin to swallow, so I scrapped the...
However, Rubin worked not only with rockers and rappers, but he also tried out himself in pop music. He worked with Lana Del Rey. This is what she said about Rubin in an interview. He's kind of a facilitator. He doesn't really push anything on anybody. His presence is sort of famously inspirational. And here we have Adele, who said that he helped her unlock her voice in a more raw and lively manner.
No final kiss to seal an easy.
Generally speaking, Rick Rubin had a big role to play in getting today's music from where it had begun to where it got to. So, before saying you have no voice, knowledge, or any instruments to produce music with, remember that one of the main people in modern-day music had never himself made any music.
So what are you being paid for?
The confidence that I have in my taste and my ability to express what I feel has proven helpful for artists.
The next video I recommend you watch is the story of another producer, whose name is Timbaland. Subscribe to Music Vibe, and see you soon.